When we were kids, I promised I'll wed you. Now she's a queen demanding I honor my word. Deathward, the planet of Elendra, was unlike any other in the galaxy. Its skies shimmered with streaks of green and violet light, painting the clouds in colors no human eye had ever seen before. Rivers flowed with water that glowed faintly under the twin moons, and the forests were full of trees that sang softly when the wind passed through their leaves. Birds, or creatures like birds but with translucent wings and tails like ribbons of light, darted between the branches. It was a world alive with wonder, and to a young human boy named Ethan, it felt like home, even though he had only recently arrived. Ethan was not like the other children on Elendra. His parents had brought him here for a few years when he was small, hoping to give him a different kind of childhood. Unlike humans, Elendrans had skin that reflected the sunlight in soft shades of silver and gold, eyes like polished gems, and long fingers that could manipulate delicate instruments and tools with ease. But among them, one girl had captured Ethan's attention the most: Lyria. She was lively and curious, her silver hair always tangled from climbing trees or running through the crystal fields. They met on the first day of Ethan's wandering. He had been following the soft glow of a river when he stumbled upon her, perched on a rock and observing the patterns in the water as if she were reading a book only she could understand. "Hello," Ethan said timidly. He was shy, unsure if she would speak to a stranger, especially a human. Lyria tilted her head and regarded him with her large, bright eyes. "You are new," she said, her voice like a soft chime. "Are you lost?" "No, I don't think so. I was just exploring," Ethan replied. He felt awkward under her gaze. Most adults he had met on the planet were polite but distant. She, however, seemed like a creature from the stories his mother used to tell him about, curious, fearless, and alive. "I'm Lyria," she said. "And you are?" "Ethan," he said, smiling nervously. "Well, Ethan, then you must follow me. I will show you something interesting." Without waiting for an answer, she leapt down from the rock and ran toward a grove of trees whose trunks shimmered with faint light. Ethan hesitated only a moment before sprinting after her, laughing at the sound of her carefree giggle echoing through the forest. That day, they discovered the crystal caves, hidden beneath the roots of the trees. Inside, walls glimmered with natural crystals that emitted a soft glow, illuminating every corner of the caverns. Lyria explained how each crystal had a vibration, a subtle energy that could make the air hum with harmony. Ethan listened, fascinated. He had never seen a world like this, and he felt a strange sense of belonging, even though he knew he was far from Earth. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ethan and Lyria explored every corner of Elendra together. They raced along floating rivers, climbed the tallest glowing trees, and even rode the native creatures that resembled a mix of horses and giant birds. Every adventure brought laughter, small challenges, and lessons about the planet and each other. Lyria taught Ethan how to sense the energy of the crystals, how to navigate the floating rivers, and even how to communicate with some of the animals using soft tones and gestures. Ethan, in turn, showed her some simple human tricks, making small tools, reading maps, and even creating tiny drawings of their explorations. One evening, they sat together on a hill overlooking the valley below. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting their pale light over everything, and the air was warm with the scent of the flowering trees. Ethan handed Lyria a small flower he had picked from the fields. "For you," he said, a little embarrassed. She smiled, taking it carefully. "It is beautiful, thank you, Ethan." She paused, watching the moons. "Do you know something? I feel like we could stay here forever, exploring, learning, laughing." Her voice softened. "But we cannot. One day you will leave and so will I. And yet I want something to remember, something we can promise each other." Ethan looked at her, curious. "A promise?" "Yes," she said, eyes sparkling. "A promise, something to hold on to even when we are far apart." She tilted her head thoughtfully. I promise that no matter where we go, we will always be friends." Ethan's heart beat faster. He had never felt such a connection before. "I promise too, always." She looked at him with a sudden seriousness, a rare moment of solemnity in her usually playful demeanor. "And maybe more than that," she smiled, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "When we grow up, will you marry me?" Ethan laughed nervously. "Marry you?" he repeated, unsure if he fully understood what marriage meant but sensing the importance of her question. "Yes," Lyria said, leaning closer. "A promise for the future, that no matter what we will stay together." Ethan hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. I promise. I'll marry you, Lyria." She jumped up, clapping her hands with joy. "Then it is decided." They both laughed, the sound mingling with the wind and the glowing forests. And at that moment, under the twin moons, a bond was sealed, not just of friendship, but of a promise that would echo through the years, unbroken. The next morning, life went on. Ethan's parents spoke about returning to Earth sooner than expected. Lyria continued her lessons with the elders, learning the ways of her people, the arts of diplomacy, and the responsibilities she would one day inherit. Yet, despite the changes around them, the promise lingered in their hearts like a bright star guiding them through uncertainty. As the years passed, Ethan returned to Earth, and Lyria stayed on Elendra, growing into her role among her people. Ethan's world became filled with human challenges, schoolwork, and the responsibilities of growing up far from the wonders of Elendra. But at night, under Earth's pale moonlight, he often looked up and remembered the glowing skies, the floating rivers, and the girl with silver hair who had made him a promise he could never forget. Lyria, too, remembered. Though she trained rigorously, attended diplomatic meetings, and learned the weight of leadership, she often walked alone in the crystal groves at night. She would look up at Elendra's twin moons, remembering the boy who had promised to marry her. And in her heart, she knew that promises made in innocence held a power stronger than any law or duty. When they finally grew into young adults, the galaxy had changed. Humans and Elendrans had begun to form tentative alliances, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. Yet the bond between Ethan and Lyria remained untouched by distance or time. Both carried the memory of their promise, though neither knew if the other still remembered it as clearly as they did. It was on a crisp morning, while Ethan was piloting a small reconnaissance ship through uncharted systems, that he received the message that would change everything. A formal request had arrived from Elendra itself. Its contents were short but unmistakable. "The Queen requests the presence of Ethan. Your childhood promise must be honored." Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. At first he thought it was a prank or a misunderstanding. But the details were unmistakable: coordinates, official seals, and the unmistakable tone of authority. Lyria was no longer the playful child he remembered. She was the queen, and she expected him to fulfill the promise he had made so many years ago under the twin moons of Elendra. He took a deep breath, looking out at the stars stretching infinitely before him. He remembered their laughter, the crystal caves, the floating rivers, and the promise. And for the first time in years, he felt the pull of Elendra stronger than any fear, hesitation, or doubt. Somehow he knew that returning was not just a duty. It was a journey to honor a bond that had begun long before politics, duty, or even time itself could interfere. As he set his course for Elendra, he could not help but smile. The promise had survived years of distance, years of change, and now it was calling him back. A new chapter awaited, filled with challenges, discoveries, and the rekindling of a connection that neither human nor alien law could sever. And in the quiet moments of the ship's hum, Ethan whispered to himself, almost as if speaking to the moons themselves, "I will keep my promise, Lyria, no matter what." The stars streaked past his ship as he approached Elendra, a planet of light, wonder, and memories waiting to be revisited. He did not yet know how the reunion would unfold, or what Lyria had become. But one thing was certain. The promise of 2 children, made under twin moons long ago, had brought him back to the heart of a world that would never let him go. And in the crystal forests of Elendra, under the glow of moons that had witnessed their childhood, Lyria waited, a queen now, yet still the same girl who had dared to ask for a promise. The future stretched before them, uncertain yet bright, and the first step of a remarkable journey was about to begin. Ethan's ship approached Elendra slowly, its engines humming softly against the endless expanse of space. The planet below shimmered like a jewel, its forests glowing faintly even in daylight, its rivers reflecting the twin moons above in perfect clarity. Memories of his childhood surged through him, the laughter, the crystal caves, and the promise he had made to Lyria. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was real, a mixture of excitement and nervousness made his heart race. He docked at the spaceport, a structure suspended over the largest of Elendra's glowing rivers. The port itself seemed alive, with corridors that shifted subtly and lights that adjusted to the presence of visitors. As Ethan stepped out of the ship, he was immediately struck by the beauty of the city around him. Buildings curved gracefully, their surfaces shimmering like liquid glass. People Elendrans moved about with calm confidence, their robes and garments glowing softly in pastel hues, and their expressions serene yet alert. Ethan took a deep breath and reminded himself why he had come. This was not just a visit. Lyria, the girl he had grown up with, was now the queen of Elendra, and she expected him to honor the promise he had made so long ago. The thought of her waiting, perhaps with some royal formality, made him both anxious and eager. A young attendant approached him, bowing slightly. "Welcome, Ethan. Queen Lyria awaits you. Follow me." Ethan nodded, following the attendant through winding corridors that led deeper into the heart of the palace. The walls were adorned with glowing patterns that shifted with the light, reflecting the moods of those walking past. Soft melodies echoed through the halls, created not by instruments but by subtle vibrations in the palace walls. Every step Ethan took felt surreal, as if he had stepped into a world far beyond human imagination. Finally, they arrived at the grand chamber. Massive crystal pillars stretched from floor to ceiling, refracting the light into delicate rainbows across the room. At the far end, a throne-like seat of luminous crystal awaited, and upon it sat Lyria, regal and radiant. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal, her posture perfectly poised, and her eyes, those familiar bright eyes, fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made his stomach flutter. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. "You have come." Ethan bowed respectfully, suddenly feeling like a child again, despite the years he had spent training as a Death Worlder. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, I received your message. I am here." Lyria's lips curved into a soft smile. "Do not be nervous. I am the same Lyria you knew, though time has shaped me in ways we both could not imagine. But some things do not change. Some promises remain." She gestured toward a platform near the throne. "Come, sit with me. Let us speak as we once did, as children under the twin moons." Ethan hesitated, then walked forward, taking a seat opposite her. The room felt impossibly vast, yet he focused on Lyria, on the memory of her laughter and the promise they had made. "Ethan," she began, "do you remember the promise you made me when we were children?" Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "I remember, Lyria. I have never forgotten it." Her eyes softened. "And yet years have passed. Life has changed us both. You have grown into a man capable of exploring worlds far beyond my own, and I have grown into a queen with responsibilities I never imagined as a child. And still, I ask that you honor that promise, not as a child's whim, but as a bond that shapes our futures." Ethan felt a rush of emotions, nostalgia, fear, admiration, and a growing sense of duty. I will, Lyria. I want to honor it. I do not know if I am ready for the responsibilities that come with it." Lyria leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. This is not a matter of rules or tradition alone. It is a matter of understanding each other, learning from each other, and walking together through challenges we cannot face alone. If you are willing, I will guide you. But you must also bring yourself fully, Ethan, as you always did. Over the next days, Ethan began to see what Lyria's life truly entailed. She was not only a queen but a diplomat, an innovator, and a leader beloved by her people. Her days were filled with meetings, decisions, and planning for the welfare of Elendra. Yet despite her position, she made time for him, walking with him through gardens that glowed with bioluminescent plants, sharing stories of the palace's history, and even laughing at some of the same childish jokes that had once echoed through the forests of their youth. One evening, as the twin moons reflected on a river near the palace, Lyria took Ethan to a high terrace overlooking the city. "This is where I come when I need clarity," she explained. "It is also where I thought of you often, remembering our promise." Ethan nodded, gazing at the moons. "I thought of you too. Even when I was far away, I remembered the laughter, the adventures, and the promise. I never forgot." Lyria smiled, but a hint of seriousness entered her expression. "Ethan, I have grown into a queen with responsibilities that touch countless lives. If you wish to honor your promise, you must understand not only me but the world I serve. You must see beyond the past into the present and even the future." This was the beginning of a series of challenges, though none were violent. Lyria guided him through the intricacies of Elendran diplomacy, teaching him how to read council debates, understand cultural nuances, and recognize the delicate balance of leadership. She introduced him to the Council of Elendra, a group of wise elders and advisors, all watching carefully to see if this human boy, now grown, could truly comprehend their ways. Ethan approached every task with the humility and curiosity he had carried as a child. He observed, listened, and learned quickly. While other humans might have been overwhelmed, his experiences as a Death Worlder, solving problems on harsh planets, understanding alien ecosystems, and adapting to unfamiliar conditions, gave him an advantage. He was patient, innovative, and open-minded, and soon he began offering solutions that impressed even the council. One day, during a discussion about a colony struggling with energy shortages, Ethan suggested a simple yet elegant solution, using the natural vibrations of the crystal formations nearby to generate power. Lyria watched him explain his idea, her expression one of pride and wonder. The council nodded in agreement, some murmuring about the ingenuity of human thinking. "That is remarkable, Ethan," Lyria said afterward. "You see possibilities where others see obstacles." "That is why I asked you to come," Ethan smiled modestly. "I only want to help. I want to honor the promise we made, Lyria. I want to be someone you can rely on as you once relied on me as a child." Lyria reached out, placing her hand lightly over his. "And you will. But this is just the beginning. To truly honor our promise, you must understand me, my people, and my world. Only then can we walk together, not just as childhood friends, but as partners." Over the following weeks, Ethan immersed himself in Elendran life. He joined Lyria in court ceremonies, visited remote villages, and learned the art of negotiation. Everywhere he went, people admired his curiosity and determination, and Lyria observed him with a mixture of affection and growing admiration. She saw in him not just the boy she had once known, but a man who could match her wit, intelligence, and compassion. One evening, after a particularly long day of council meetings and village visits, they sat quietly by the glowing river near the palace. Lyria broke the silence. "Ethan, do you remember the crystal caves where we first explored together?" Ethan laughed softly. "Of course. I still remember how your laughter echoed through the tunnels. I remember how amazed we both were at the glow of the crystals." Lyria's eyes softened. "I wanted to show you that the world has not lost its wonder, even with responsibilities and duties. and I wanted to remind you why I asked you to honor the promise. It is not about tradition or obligation. It is about sharing life, understanding each other, and facing challenges together. That is what promises are truly for. Ethan looked at her, seeing not just a queen, but the girl who had once pulled him through forests, laughed at tiny waterfalls, and shared dreams under twin moons. He realized that the promise he had made was no longer a childish vow. It was a bond between two people who had grown, learned, and experienced life apart, only to find themselves again. As the moons reflected on the water, Ethan spoke softly. "I understand, Lyria. I may not know everything about your world yet, but I want to learn. I want to walk with you, not just because of a promise, but because of who you are, and because of the life we can share together." Lyria smiled, a mixture of relief, pride, and warmth shining in her eyes. "Then we begin anew, Ethan. Not as children playing with promises, but as partners ready to face the future together." The night deepened, but the glow from the rivers, the moons, and the distant forests made it feel like day. Ethan realized that returning to Elendra had not just been a journey across space. It had been a journey to rediscover a bond that time could not erase. And as he looked at Lyria, standing tall and radiant beside him, he knew that the adventures of their childhood were only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would challenge them, inspire them, and show the galaxy the strength of human heart and determination, even on the most alien of worlds. Ethan's days on Elendra settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Each morning, the palace was alive with activity, council meetings, ambassadors arriving from distant planets, and servants attending to the needs of the queen. Yet through all of it, Lyria made sure Ethan was included, guiding him, teaching him, and most importantly, observing how he faced challenges. One morning, Lyria approached Ethan in the palace gardens, where the air shimmered with soft bioluminescent light even under the gentle warmth of the sun. "Today," she said, her voice calm yet carrying authority, "we will begin your first trial." Ethan frowned, uncertainty flickering in his mind. "Trial? What kind of trial?" She smiled gently. "It is not a test of strength nor of skill with weapons. It is a test of understanding, empathy, and ingenuity. To honor a promise, one must first understand the world of the person who made it and the people they care for. You must see through their eyes and feel their needs." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand. What do I need to do?" Lyria led him to a nearby village, where the Elendrans lived more simply than those in the palace. Homes were constructed from glowing crystal, their shapes elegant and curved, harmonizing with the natural energy of the land. Children played along the softly lit streets, and elders tended gardens that glowed faintly in the sunlight. "The village is facing a problem," Lyria explained. "Their main water source is weakening. The rivers that feed the town are drying in certain areas, and the villagers do not have the technology or knowledge to restore it fully. You must find a solution that helps them, and helps them in a way they can sustain themselves." Ethan walked along the river, observing the water carefully. It flowed slowly, and in some areas it seemed blocked by natural debris. He noticed how the villagers had tried simple fixes, like small dams and channels, but these only shifted the problem elsewhere. He knelt by the water, letting his fingers trace the flow, trying to understand its rhythm, as he had learned to do as a deathworlder on harsh planets. After some thought, he suggested, "The river's flow changes with the energy in the crystals along its banks. If we place small, flexible channels near the crystal formations, we can guide the water without disturbing the natural balance. The villagers can maintain it themselves using the energy patterns the crystals produce." The villagers stared, uncertain, but Lyria nodded approvingly. "Show them, Ethan. Guide them. Let them understand." He spent the day with the villagers, demonstrating his plan. He explained the connection between the crystals and the water, and slowly they began to understand. By evening, small channels had been created, the river flowed steadily again, and the villagers smiled, amazed by the clever simplicity of the solution. Lyria watched quietly, pride shining in her eyes. "You did well," she said later as they walked back to the palace. "You see beyond the surface and you understand how to help without taking control. That is the first step of understanding responsibility." Ethan smiled, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. "It feels good to help like that." "The next trial will be different," Lyria said. "It will test your patience and your ability to see through the eyes of others." She took him to a large courtyard within the palace, where a garden of glowing plants thrived. Some plants reacted to touch, others to sound, and a few only bloomed under careful attention. "These plants are delicate," Lyria explained. "Each responds differently to care. You must learn how to nurture them and keep them thriving. You cannot force their growth. You must understand them and work with their nature." Ethan spent hours observing each plant, noting its reactions and patterns. Some responded to soft humming, some to gentle sunlight reflected from mirrors he placed around the courtyard. He adjusted watering schedules based on their needs, experimented with different approaches, and slowly the plants flourished. Lyria watched silently, occasionally offering subtle guidance but never interfering. "You are learning to see the world through more than your own perspective," she said at the end of the day. "That is the essence of leadership and partnership. You are beginning to understand what it means to walk with someone and not ahead or behind them." Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued his training. Lyria introduced him to various challenges, helping mediate minor disputes among villagers, creating sustainable food programs for the palace kitchens, and learning the art of communication with alien species that often visited Elendra for trade or cultural exchange. Each challenge was designed not to intimidate, but to show him the depth of understanding and empathy required to support a queen and to honor a promise. One day, a small problem arose that seemed trivial but tested Ethan's patience. A group of young Elendran apprentices had accidentally knocked over a delicate display of crystals in the palace library. The crystals were harmless, but could no longer produce the musical tones they had before. Ethan observed quietly as the children tried to fix their mistake, then guided them gently, showing how to restore the crystal's balance. The children listened attentively, amazed by his calm demeanor and practical solutions. Lyria appeared as the last crystal was adjusted. "You see, Ethan," she said, "sometimes challenges are not grand or obvious. Sometimes they are small and the test is in how you respond. Patience, understanding, and gentle guidance are as important as bold action." Ethan nodded. "I think I understand, Lyria. It's not just about helping. It's about understanding how others see the problem and what they need to solve it themselves." She smiled. "Exactly. And that is what I meant when I said this journey would be about more than a promise. It is about learning to walk together, to support and strengthen each other. You are proving that you are capable of more than words." Another challenge arrived in the form of a diplomatic meeting. Delegates from a neighboring planet had come to Elendra to discuss trade agreements, but cultural misunderstandings made negotiations tense. Ethan observed as Lyria mediated with elegance, listening to concerns and suggesting compromises. Then she turned to him. "Ethan," she said, "you will present a solution from a human perspective. Use what you know, but remember the customs here. Show them how collaboration can benefit both worlds." Ethan hesitated at first, uncertain if he could meet the expectations of alien leaders. But he took a deep breath and began speaking, carefully blending human logic with Elendran tradition. He suggested a shared system for distributing resources that relied on both human efficiency and Elendran energy patterns. The delegates listened, intrigued. By the end of the discussion, they agreed on a plan that satisfied all parties, thanks in part to Ethan's careful observations and creative thinking. Afterward, Lyria placed her hand on his arm. You have done well. You see possibilities where others see conflict. That is the strength humans bring, Ethan. Your perspective is unique and it complements my own. Ethan felt a swell of pride but also humility. I am learning from you as much as I am contributing. Without your guidance, I would not have understood these things. You are learning quickly, Lyria said, and that is why I am certain our promise can endure. It is not just words. It is a partnership built on understanding, empathy, and action. That is what we are creating together. As the days passed, Ethan began to feel more confident. The trials were no longer intimidating. They were opportunities to grow, to connect with Lyria, and to understand Elendra in ways he never could have imagined. He began to feel a deep sense of belonging, not just on the planet but beside Lyria, supporting her and learning from her. One evening, they sat by a small river near the palace, watching the reflection of the twin moons on the water. Ethan turned to Lyria. I never imagined that honoring a childhood promise would be so complex, but I also never imagined it would feel so meaningful. I see now why you asked me to come. Lyria smiled softly. The promise was never about words alone. It was about understanding, commitment, and growth. You are proving that you are capable of walking alongside me, Ethan, and that is all I could ever ask. Ethan nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt since their childhood adventures. The trials were not finished, but he no longer feared them. Each challenge was a chance to show Lyria that he was more than the boy who had made a playful promise. He was a human who could adapt, understand, and contribute to a world far beyond his own. That night, as he lay in the guest quarters of the palace, Ethan reflected on the journey so far. The promise had brought him back to Elendra, but it was the challenges, the learning, and the connection with Lyria that made him realize the true meaning of his vow. It was not just about marriage or words. It was about becoming someone worthy of trust, respect, and partnership. And somewhere across the palace, Lyria looked at the glowing sky above Elendra and thought the same. The boy she had once laughed with under twin moons was no longer a child, and yet he carried the same heart, curiosity, and courage that had won her trust and friendship. The promise was alive, strengthened by years of growth, and ready to face the future together. Ethan's trials were only beginning, but for the first time he felt certain that he could meet them, not by force, not by command, but by understanding, ingenuity, and heart. And in that certainty, the bond forged in childhood shone brighter than any challenge the galaxy could place before them. Ethan's life on Elendra had transformed completely. The palace, once an overwhelming maze of crystal halls and glowing gardens, now felt like a second home. He moved among the people, learned their ways, and increasingly found himself at the center of Lyria's plans. Yet, the greatest challenges were not the tasks themselves. They were the expectations, the subtleties of diplomacy, and the weight of a promise made in childhood. One morning, Lyria called Ethan to the council chamber. Delegates from several neighboring systems had arrived, each with different ideas, rules, and concerns. Some were curious about humans, others doubted their reliability. Lyria, seated at the head of the chamber, gestured for Ethan to stand beside her. "Ethan," she said, "this is a test not of strength, but of judgment and understanding. You must show them the perspective of humans and demonstrate that our promise and our partnership can create solutions that benefit everyone." Ethan swallowed hard. This was far larger than guiding villagers or managing palace gardens. These were leaders, decision-makers whose words affected entire worlds. He took a deep breath and nodded. The discussion began. One delegate, a tall alien with golden-hued skin, argued that humans were too impulsive and inexperienced to be trusted with interplanetary agreements. Another, a soft-spoken representative from a neighboring forest world, questioned whether a human could ever truly understand the delicate balance of Elendra's ecosystems. Ethan listened carefully. Unlike as a child, he could not rely on instinct alone. He had to observe, understand, and respond. He remembered Lyria's lessons: empathy, patience, and perspective. He began to speak. "I understand your concerns," he said. "Humans are different, yes. We approach problems in ways that may seem unusual. But I have learned the ways of Elendra, its people, and its natural systems. I see the connections, the needs, and the possibilities. My goal is not to dominate or impose, but to contribute solutions that respect the balance and harmony you value." The delegates exchanged glances. One murmured in approval, another raised a skeptical eyebrow. Ethan continued, describing a plan for shared resources that allowed both humans and Elendrans to benefit while maintaining the planet's natural energies. He explained step by step how humans could offer technological support without disrupting the ecosystems, using the same creativity and adaptability he had relied on as a Deathworlder. Lyria watched silently, a quiet pride in her eyes. She had invited him not just as a test of diplomacy, but as a chance to show his heart, intellect, and understanding. And now, as the delegates nodded in careful consideration, she saw that he had succeeded. After the council meeting, Lyria led Ethan to a terrace overlooking the Crystal Gardens. "You handled that brilliantly," she said. "You spoke with wisdom, clarity, and respect. You are beginning to show that the promise we made is more than words. It is a partnership built on trust and understanding." Ethan exhaled, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. "I only hope I am worthy," he said. "You are," Lyria replied simply. "And the next challenge will test your ability to act not just in council chambers, but in the real lives of the people we serve." She guided him to a village near the outer forests of Elendra, where recent changes in weather had caused shortages in food and energy. The villagers were struggling to maintain crops that depended on a delicate balance of light, water, and crystal energy. Ethan observed carefully, recalling every lesson he had learned about adaptation, creativity, and understanding. He worked with the villagers, creating simple yet effective systems to distribute water evenly and ensure the crystal's energy was used efficiently. He guided them in planting new crops that could thrive under changing conditions and demonstrated techniques for monitoring the rivers and light cycles. Within days, the village began to recover, and the villagers praised his ingenuity and patience. One elder, a wise figure with silver hair and glowing eyes, approached Ethan. "You see what we need," she said. "You understand our ways, yet bring a perspective we could not see. That is rare, even among our own people." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. "I am only trying to honor a promise," he replied humbly, "and to help in any way I can." Lyria stood beside him, her hand brushing his gently. "That is exactly why this promise matters. It is not about obligation, but about care, understanding, and partnership. You are learning what it truly means to walk together with someone, and that is far more important than any title or ceremony." Weeks turned into months, and Ethan's trials became more complex. Lyria invited him to participate in planning for interplanetary trade, designing educational programs for children, and creating cultural exchanges that brought humans and Elendrans closer together. Each task tested him in new ways, not physically, but intellectually and emotionally. One particularly significant challenge came when a misunderstanding arose with a delegation from a distant desert planet. They had misinterpreted a resource-sharing agreement and accused Elendra of attempting to take more than its share. Tensions rose, and diplomacy became delicate. Lyria turned to Ethan. "Your insight is needed here," she said. "You have a unique way of seeing solutions. Show them that collaboration is possible." Ethan spent hours reviewing reports, listening to concerns, and analyzing the situation. He realized that the misunderstanding stemmed from differences in perception and measurement systems. Using simple diagrams, careful explanations, and a calm, patient demeanor, he clarified the agreement in a way everyone could understand. The desert delegates smiled, nodding in understanding. "We see now," one said. "Your approach is fair and your solutions are clear. We appreciate your guidance." Lyria exhaled in relief and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You see, this is the heart of partnership. It is not force but understanding. It is not dominance but collaboration. And you are learning it with grace." Despite the success, Ethan never grew complacent. Each day brought new challenges, and he faced them with patience, thoughtfulness, and creativity. He learned the subtleties of Elendrin culture, the importance of timing in negotiations, and the value of listening more than speaking. With every trial, Lyria watched him closely, silently measuring the growth of the boy she had once played with under twin moons. One quiet evening, Lyria and Ethan walked through a grove of glowing trees. The air was filled with a gentle hum from the plants, and the light of the twin moons reflected off the crystal leaves. "Ethan," Lyria said softly, "do you realize what you have accomplished? You have not just proven yourself to the council, the villagers, or the diplomats. You have proven to yourself that you can face challenges with integrity, empathy, and intelligence. That is the essence of keeping a promise." Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand now. The promise is not just about saying I will marry you. It is about becoming someone worthy of walking beside you, supporting you, and facing the future together." Lyria nodded. "Exactly, and that is why I have brought you these trials. They are not punishments but lessons, lessons that prepare us for the life we will share." Ethan looked up at the moons, remembering the night when they had made their promise as children. The memory was clear, filled with laughter, wonder, and the innocence of youth. Now the promise carried a depth he had never imagined. It was no longer a playful vow. It was a bond forged through understanding, action, and trust. As they walked back to the palace, Lyria spoke of the final trial that awaited Ethan. It would require him to integrate everything he had learned, empathy, ingenuity, diplomacy, and patience, into a challenge that affected the entire region. The details were not yet revealed, but the anticipation filled Ethan with a mixture of excitement and determination. He realized that the promise he had made as a child had grown with them. It was not static. It adapted, deepened, and demanded growth from both of them. And Ethan knew he was ready. He had learned the ways of Elendra, the needs of its people, and the responsibilities that came with standing beside Lyria. He understood that promises, when honored with heart and action, could create change far beyond the words themselves. That night, as he gazed out over the city from his quarters, Ethan felt a calm determination. The trials had taught him more than he could have imagined, not just about Lyria, her world, or her people, but about himself. He had grown into a man capable of walking beside a queen, ready to face challenges, and prepared to honor a promise that had endured time and distance. And somewhere in the palace, Lyria looked at the stars above Elendra and smiled. She had guided Ethan through trials that would have daunted many, and yet he had risen to meet each challenge with heart, mind, and courage. The promise of childhood was no longer a memory. It was a living reality, strengthened by growth, understanding, and unwavering commitment. Tomorrow would bring the final trial, the ultimate test of partnership and understanding. But tonight, as the twin moons reflected on the glowing rivers and forests, both Ethan and Lyria felt a quiet certainty. The bond they had forged as children had grown into something far greater, a partnership built on trust, wisdom, and love. And the galaxy itself seemed to acknowledge it, as if the stars themselves shone a little brighter in recognition of the promise, fulfilled through growth and heart. The morning sky of Elendra glowed with the pale hues of dawn, reflecting softly on the crystal towers of the palace. Ethan stood at the edge of the royal gardens, feeling the cool breeze against his face. Today was the day of his final trial, the one that would prove whether he was truly ready to honor the promise he had made so many years ago. Lyria appeared beside him, her presence calm yet commanding. She looked at Ethan with a mixture of pride and affection. "Ethan," she said, "today you will face a challenge that tests all you have learned. It is not about cleverness alone, nor about knowledge. It is about heart, understanding, and partnership. Are you ready?" Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I am ready, Lyria. I have learned from the trials, from the people, and from you. I will do my best." Lyria nodded. "Good, then follow me." They walked through the palace corridors to the council chamber, where leaders from every corner of Elendra and representatives from neighboring planets had gathered. The room was filled with glowing crystal panels that displayed maps, data, and energy flows across the region. At the center, a model of Elendra and its surrounding systems hovered in the air, projected by light from the crystals. "This trial," Lyria explained, "requires you to solve a problem that affects all of Elendra. It is a situation of balance. If you succeed, you will have demonstrated understanding, empathy, and the ability to act wisely. If you fail, we will all learn from it, but it will not honor the promise we hold." Ethan studied the projections. The problem was complex. Certain energy currents in the planet's rivers and crystal formations were fluctuating unexpectedly, affecting crops, water distribution, and even the communication systems in distant villages. The elders had tried to stabilize them, but the fluctuations persisted. Lyria turned to him. "You must find a solution that is sustainable, respects the natural balance, and ensures the well-being of our people," she said. Ethan nodded, observing the intricate flows displayed on the holographic map. He traced the currents with his hand, analyzing their patterns, and remembered everything Lyria had taught him: the connection between the crystals, water, and the planet's energy, as well as the needs of the people who relied on them. After a few moments of thought, he began speaking. "The fluctuations are caused by minor misalignments in the energy channels across the crystal rivers. If we adjust the channels carefully, using small guiding structures that work with the natural energy, the currents will stabilize. But this cannot be done by force. The villagers and workers must participate, understanding the process, so they can maintain it themselves." The delegates looked intrigued. Ethan continued, explaining the steps to correct the misalignments, create sustainable monitoring systems, and ensure that every village had the knowledge to manage the adjustments. He suggested using simple tools adapted from both human and Elendran technology, designed to respect the planet's energy without causing further imbalance. Lyria watched silently, her eyes filled with pride. She could see the human ingenuity and empathy in Ethan's approach. It was precise, careful, and considerate of every factor, from the smallest plant to the highest energy currents. The council murmured among themselves, impressed by his thoroughness. One elder spoke up. "This approach is thoughtful, sustainable, and respectful of our ways. It shows understanding and wisdom." Ethan nodded. "It is not just about fixing a problem," he said. "It is about ensuring that the people understand it, can manage it, and will benefit from it long after the work is done. That is how we honor the balance of Elendra." Lyria placed her hand on his arm. "Do you see, Ethan? You have already succeeded. The solution is not just clever, it is compassionate. That is the heart of this trial." With Lyria's guidance, Ethan and the council coordinated teams of villagers and palace workers. They adjusted the energy channels, guided the water flows, and ensured every step was sustainable. As the day progressed, the rivers stabilized, crops thrived, and communication lines in distant villages returned to full strength. The elders and delegates smiled, acknowledging the careful wisdom of the human who had returned to Elendra to honor a childhood promise. By evening, the entire palace and surrounding land seemed to glow with renewed energy. Ethan looked around, feeling the satisfaction of having contributed something meaningful. Yet, more than that, he felt a deep connection to Lyria, to her people, and to the promise that had brought him back to this world. Lyria approached him, her silver hair shimmering in the moonlight. "Ethan, you have completed the final trial. You have shown wisdom, empathy, ingenuity, and courage of heart. You are worthy, not because of a childhood promise alone, but because of who you are." Ethan felt a rush of emotion, remembering the little boy who had run through the forests with Lyria, the promise whispered under twin moons, and the journey that had brought him here. "Thank you, Lyria," he said softly. "It was not just a trial, it was a journey. And I could not have done it without your guidance." She smiled warmly. "Then let us honor the promise properly." Lyria led Ethan to the palace gardens, where the crystal trees glowed softly under the light of the twin moons. Villagers, elders, and delegates gathered quietly, aware that something significant was about to happen. Lyria turned to Ethan, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Ethan," she said, "we made a promise as children, a promise of trust, friendship, and a life shared together. Today you have proven that our promise is not just words, it is action, understanding, and heart. Will you honor it fully?" Ethan took her hands in his, looking into her eyes. "I will, Lyria. I promise to walk beside you, to support you, and to honor the bond we share, not because it is a duty, but because it is a joy and a privilege." The crowd watched silently, feeling the sincerity of the moment. Lyria's eyes shone with tears of joy. "Then our promise is fulfilled. Not just by words, but by heart and action. And from this day forward, we walk together as partners, equals, and friends." Ethan and Lyria smiled, a quiet certainty settling between them. The journey had not been easy, but it had strengthened their bond in ways that neither could have imagined as children. They had faced challenges, learned from each other, and grown into roles that required wisdom, understanding, and compassion. Over the following days, celebrations were held throughout Elendra. People honored not just the queen, but the human who had come to understand their world, contribute to their well-being, and honor a promise with action and integrity. Delegates from neighboring systems praised Ethan's ingenuity and humility, recognizing that humans brought a unique perspective that could complement Elendran wisdom. Yet, amidst the celebrations, Ethan and Lyria often found quiet moments together. They walked through the crystal forests, revisited the riverbanks where their childhood adventures had begun, and spoke softly under the twin moons. They laughed, shared memories, and dreamed of the future, a future they would face side by side. One evening, as they sat by a small river, Lyria spoke softly. "Ethan, do you remember the first time we made our promise?" Ethan smiled. "I do. I remember the twin moons, the crystal caves, and how we laughed at everything. I never thought that day would lead to this moment, but I am glad it did." Lyria reached for his hand. "We have grown, we have learned, and we have faced challenges that could have been overwhelming. And yet we stand here together. That is the true meaning of our promise." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "I know now that a promise is more than words. It is commitment, care, and the willingness to grow together. You have taught me that, Lyria, and I will carry it with me always." As the twin moons reflected on the river, Ethan realized that the promise he had made as a child had been the starting point of a journey that changed him completely. It had brought him back to Elendra, taught him the value of empathy and understanding, and shown him the strength of human ingenuity in a galaxy filled with wonders. And Lyria, the queen he had once played with under the glowing skies of their childhood, knew that the boy she had trusted long ago had grown into a man worthy of walking beside her, not as a subject, not as a visitor, but as a partner in every sense. The promise was no longer just a memory of childhood. It was a living reality, strengthened by trials, understanding, and unwavering commitment. Together, they would face the challenges of Elendra, the galaxy, and whatever adventures awaited beyond the stars. But for now, they simply sat by the river, hand in hand, hearts aligned, knowing that the bond forged in innocence had grown into something extraordinary. And somewhere across Elendra, the people watched and smiled. They had witnessed a human not only adapt to an alien world, but understand it, contribute to its harmony, and honor a promise with integrity. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations, a story of partnership, growth, and the power of keeping a promise across time and space. As the twin moons glimmered above, Ethan and Lyria stood, ready to walk into the future together. Their promise, once whispered under the glow of childhood moons, was now a living testament to trust, love, and the extraordinary capacity of humans to rise, learn, and make a difference, even among the stars. And so, under the light of Elendra's moons, with the crystal rivers flowing and forests humming with life, two beings, one human, one Elendran, began a new chapter. A chapter of shared dreams, mutual respect, and a promise that would endure beyond time, space, and the countless challenges the galaxy could offer. Together, they walked forward hand in hand, ready to face the wonders and mysteries of the universe, not as strangers, not as distant friends, but as partners in the truest sense of the word. The promise had been fulfilled, and the story of a boy and a girl, made long ago under the twin moons of Elendra, became legend, a tale of heart, courage, and the extraordinary power of keeping one's word.